Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Savan Qadir. In this evening program, I will be presenting the program with Linda Fabiani. As always, we're going to start with Ukrainian update, day 282. US President Joe Biden and French President Emmanuel Macron presented a united front on Ukraine, with Biden saying he would talk to Russian President Vladimir Putin if he is willing to end the war and only in consultation with the NATO allies. President Biden and President Macron also pledged to hold Russia accountable for widely documented atrocities and war crimes in Ukraine. Russian rockets found in neighborhoods in Kherson, knocking out power in a city where electricity had only begun to be restored nearly 3 weeks after the Russian troops left. Local authorities said about 2/3 of Kherson had electricity as of Thursday night. Some of residents congregated at train station or at government-supported tents that provided heating, food, drinks, and electricity to charge mobile phone. Kyiv's Mayor Vitaly Klitschko told residents to stock up on water, food, and warm clothes in the event of total blackout caused by Russian strike. Ukraine's armed forces have lost somewhere between 10,000 and 13,000 soldiers so far in the war against Russia. Presidential advisor Mikhailo Podolyak told a Ukrainian television network, Channel 24, on Thursday. More than 1,300 prisoners have been returned to Ukraine since Russian troops invaded Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Thursday. EU members have tentatively agreed to a $60 a barrel price cap on Russian seaborne oil, diplomats said on Thursday. Europe will begin enforcing an embargo on Russian crude shipments from Monday, so the price cap will apply to oil exported by sea by Moscow to ports around the world. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said it was too early to reach a verdict on the talks between Poland and Germany about sending the Patriot air defense system from Germany to Ukraine. Spain has ordered increased security at governments, buildings, and embassies after the discovery of bombs and incendiary devices, including one that exploded at Ukraine embassy in Madrid on Wednesday and another that was detected at the US embassy on Thursday. Ukraine is planning to impose limitation on religious organizations in the country which have links to Russia. And a $200 million super yacht owned by Viktor Medvedev and an oligarch and friend of Vladimir Putin, who's under sanction, is to be sold at auction after his seizure in Croatia early this year. So, Linda, I want to ask you about the President Biden's comment and about willing to talk to Russia, if only a conditional offer. What do you make of that?
Well, we always say, don't we, Savan, that we should always be talking and always keep talking. And obviously that offer's been made by President Biden. I mean, my only concern about it is that it seems to me that Vladimir Putin seems to be beyond talking. I heard a couple of reports about it today, and his spokesperson saying there's no point in talking, we're carrying on with our special operation. I mean, they refused to call it an invasion or a war. Biden's quite right. You've got to keep these lines of communication open if at all possible. But he's also quite right that it has to be conditional on, willing to talk seriously about stopping the war and bringing peace back to that area. He also can't do it in private. He has to do it in consultation with his NATO allies. So, yes, the offer's always got to be there. Unfortunately, I think Vladimir Putin just poo-poos any idea of bringing these hostilities to a halt, doesn't accept that he is in the wrong in any way whatsoever. And unfortunately, the people of Ukraine are suffering, as indeed are some Russian people as well. A horrible situation all round. But Biden and allies have got to keep these lines of communication open.
Absolutely, and there was an interesting line saying they want to. President Biden was saying, actually, we need to hold them accountable. It's something about accountability. But I was wondering, what does that actually mean? How would you hold Russian accountable when he just pulled out in international court? And what's the mechanism?
I don't know if there is one, to be honest. As I say, there just seems to be an intransigence there on behalf of Russia. Unfortunately, Vladimir Putin speaks for Russia. There's an intransigence there. How do you hold people to account when they insist on causing pain, hardship, terror to a neighbouring nation, which is what they're doing? And part of your report there, Savan, was saying about how they have again pounded the infrastructure and electricity supplies, fuel supplies in the Ukraine in parts where they were just starting to get it back together again. So there's a complete intent of destroying anything that Ukraine does here. So no, unfortunately, it would seem that there isn't a will to stop this carnage and destruction. I'm beginning to think, and this is entirely a personal opinion, that the only thing that would ever stop Vladimir Putin would be if it came internally, either in his own government or indeed by real uprising of the Russian people. I think we'd all hoped it would have come before now, and here we are. I can't remember what particular day you said at the start of your report, but we're much, much further down the line than everyone hoped would be the. So it's nearly 300 days, I think. And
Yes.
my goodness, I remember at the start, everyone was saying, this shouldn't last too long. We should be able to sort this. We haven't been able to sort it. The war continues.
I think 282 days of the war, and we just heard this is just the soldiers, 10,000 to 13,000 soldiers lost their life, and we're gonna move on to another topic, which is it's a very interesting one, and Loch Lomond and Chosen National Park. National Park Authority considered a step back for flamingo land plans. Proposal for a huge holiday park on the shores of Loch Lomond, which have been described as a threat to one of Scotland's most treasured natural beauty spots, could be blocked by park chiefs after they demanded developers provide answers on 16 areas of major concern, including the destruction of ancient woodland. Loch Lomond and Chosroes National Park Authority, who need to approve any planning application, have fired off a major rebuke to flamingo land contractors, Stentic, pointing out gaping holes and contradictions in their controversial bid to build the resort in the face of 33,000 objections so far. Among the list of issues raised by the Park Authority are the lack of properly detailed environmental impact assessment, clear information on the potential impact on the ancient woods and water quality, and any kind of figure on how much more traffic would be added to already congested local roads. Over half of the demands made by park posters appear to be based on concerns raised in the objection lodged by Scottish Grain MSP Ross Greer, and written by planning law expert Ian Cohn, which warned the Park Authority of serious flaws in the application process and stated that the Green MSP would consider a judicial review if this were not rectified. As an example, Flamingo Land will have to provide an updated, clearer environmental impact assessment, and this will be subject to a further period of consultation. This follows Mr. Greer's submission, pointing out that the submitted documents and consultation previously failed to meet legal standards and could have the National Park's decision subject to legal challenge. The Park Authority's letter asked for clarity on key aspects of the plan, including damage to ancient woodland, parking provision, and the impact on traffic congestion. It will require submission of a number of key documents. Flamingo Land reapplied for planning permission for 2 hotels, 127 holiday lodges, and water park, monorail, and much more in Ballach earlier this year. The plans have been drawn over 33,000 objections so far, including from the National Trust Woodland and Trust Ramblers Scotland. The theme park operator's previous application was withdrawn in 2019 after a record of 60,000 objections were lodged, and park officials recommended to their board that it to be rejected. So This story's been going on since 2019, and it's been attempt and failed attempt so far. And
Mm.
previously in 2019 was 60,000 objection, but it seems like there's some progress. And now it's 33,000 objection. What do you make of that? Do you think and what's the local authority and the local people are really concerning about? Because it seems like it's a lot about uh, protecting the environment and also the ancient mood.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I remember. I mean, it must be nearly 20 years since the designation of Loch Lomond as a national park, and of course that put in place the park authority, separate from the local authority. But since there's always been concern about applications coming forward in the national park. Of course there are. That's the way it should be. But this particular one, Flamingo Land, I don't know huge detail about it, but I do know the area rather well. And it's Balloch that they're talking about putting Flamingo Land in. Certainly, we could do with some things happening in Balloch. It's an area that could benefit, because it's had various things over the years that don't seem to have worked really well. I'm not convinced from what I've read, from what I've heard, and indeed speaking to Ross Greer, one of the local MSPs, and other MSPs from that area, they have real concerns about it too. Environmental impact assessment, it would seem to me that any developer wanting to develop a massive theme park, or whatever you want to call it, should always be looking at environmental impact, particularly when it's in a national park. So I was really quite shocked to see that there was all these gaps in the environmental impact assessment and that it has to be properly carried out. Ancient woods, we've got initiatives all over the country to preserve ancient woods. So within our national parks, surely we have to be very, very sure that we're not putting these in danger. Water quality was another one. And the roads have always been a nightmare round Loch Lomond, just by the nature of the area. So there's a lot to be going
Yeah.
in there. And if locals aren't happy, it has to be looked at very carefully.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting, and see how it develop in the future, because it seems like they will be applying for it again, and there's a legal challenge there. So there's another story. It's about the UK. The UK has hastily designed a seasonal worker visa, which is causing a headache for supermarket, which are concerned its structure is incompatible with the public pledge on preventing human rights abuses and debt bondage in their supply chains. All the big supermarkets have been holding urgent roundtable meeting with growers and others in the industry over the past months to try to find a way of preventing workers from being further exploited under it. The scheme was created to create a cheap supply of workers on 6-month visas so UK farms could plug labour shortages after Brexit. But many in the industry concerned the structure is putting vulnerable migrants at risk of exploitation. Charging recruitment fees is against the law, but it is with the rules of the visa for workers to bear the vast cost of international flights and visas, which can put them thousands of pounds in debt even when no illegal fees are charged. David Camp, the director of the Association of Labour Providers, said, "We've been asking for significant change to the scheme for years. What I find unfortunate is that it takes people to suffer before action taken." Camp said the UK government is needed to take early decision about visa allocation so recruiters could put in proper time to sourcing workers carefully. He also said the scheme rules needed to be redesigned. We should have a system. We should have a system where workers don't have to go into debt to come and work in the UK. That should be a given, he said. So, and there has been a lot of talk, Linda, about migrants workers, and so particularly
Mm.
after Brexit. After Brexit, there's been huge labor shortages, and
Hmm.
now the workers are coming here. There's been overcharged and being further, what they are at risk of being further exploited. How do you think that would impact people who wants to come and work, and uh, potentially helping the UK to fill in the labor shortages and filling those gaps if uh, the system is there to exploit them, or they are at risk of exploiting? Do you think that will attract other workers to come and work here?
Well, Unfortunately, there are always people who will take a chance because they think that they're coming to a good deal and a better deal. People who are ripe for exploitation. And one of the things that Brexit has done is opened the door to that, as you said, further exploitation of people, because people can't come here through freedom of movement, as they did for many, many years while we were members of the EU. So the door has been opened by the UK government to exploitation of workers. And it just shows the complete lack of preparation they had, the complete lack of forward planning. They've had to cobble together this 6-month visa to try and avert a crisis, an employment crisis. I mean, we've all heard the stories of fruit rotting in the fields, etc. Now, one of the things that I think makes this really very, very serious is that we have major supermarkets now really concerned about human rights abuses and potential exploitation within their supply chains. The fact that they're speaking out, the fact that they have been calling on the UK government for a long time now to get this right, I think is very important. It would suggest to me that they can see clear ways in which people will be exploited. Now, it sounds to me like it's about their airfares, etc. Who's paying the airfares? How's that paid back? Yes, it may be illegal to charge recruitment fees, but there's always folks out there that can find loopholes and exploit people. And I
Do you
think
think?
this is what's behind what the supermarkets are now fighting about. My
Yeah.
concern is if we get gangmasters and things involved again.
Mm,
Is that what they're saying, that this could potentially happen?
yeah.
That's horrendous.
Yeah.
No guarantees of 6 months work when they come, no guarantees of minimum hours. It's just leaving the door open.
And do you
They can
think?
talk all about sorry, I keep going on about it. I'm
No, no,
really
no, no. Sorry,
sorry.
no, no, no. No, no, no.
But
I
I
want you to
just
keep going
think
about. I was just. Yeah.
so
I.
right for exploitation.
Mm-hmm. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying it's so ripe for exploitation. They've left these loopholes there,
Okay.
and it really has to be properly looked at. I just wish that the Scottish Government was able to take some decisions relative to Scotland in this, rather than it being left to Westminster, where they do not know
Mm.
the particular issues that Scotland has either. And we could do it so much better with the local knowledge we have and also with the will to protect people.
Thank you. It seems like Brexit not just weaken our labor market, but also weaken labor's right as well. And
Yeah.
they're trying to go deeper in that way. I think that was one of the benefit of Brexit. Labour. I mean, we're going to move on to another one. This is about Labour holding the city of Chester by election as SNP call on Keir Starmer to respect Scottish democracy. Keir Starmer has welcomed Labour's commanding by-election victory in the city of Chester, saying the result was evidence voters want to change Labour offers. The Labour leader tweeted his congratulations to Samantha Dixon, the incoming Labour MP, on Friday morning after she won the seat with the party's highest ever vote share. Labour secured a majority of 10,974 on a 14-point vote swing in a brutal first electoral test for Rishi Sunak. Sajaya Curtis, a professor of politics at Sacklight University, told BBC4's Today's programme on Friday the result indicated Labour would win a sizable victory if a general election were held today. An SNP MSP has challenged Keir Starmer to outline the democratic route for people of Scotland to have a say over their future as the pro-Brexit Labour Party leader makes a swift visit to Scotland. Since becoming leader, Starmer has been branded by SNP as being out of touch with Scotland. He has been accused of repeatedly adopted Tory policies, turning his party pro-Brexit party and leading it further to the right. SNP MSP Paul McLennan said it is little wonder that Keir Starmer, a pro-Brexit politician leading a pro-Brexit Labour Party, is keeping his visit to Scotland swift. It seems that can't help but his footed in every time he's here. He's either clueless or uninterested about the needs of Scotland and the damage being inflicted across communities in Scotland by Brexit and anti-immigration policies. And the cherry on the top of the still Labour cake is his flat out of denial of Scottish democracy. He must outline what the route is for the Scottish people to have a say over their future in a referendum, or admit that he doesn't believe they should have that right. So That's a very, very strong statements there. And what do you make of that? And because I just want to, give you a little update about that. There's just been a poll, a new poll that's been by Ominous for online news outlet by Byline Times, which is saying that 50% of those expressing an opinion believe the Scottish government should be 55% of those, 55% expressing an opinion believe the Scottish government should be able to hold another independent referendum. I think my question is, it is more than just holding a referendum. It's about the right of self-determination. It's about recognizing Scotland as a country. And why is it so difficult for Labour, Westminster Labour and Tory to recognise that?
Well, I'll say what I've said before. I get the Tories, right? I understand them. They have always been imperialistic in their views, and they have always wanted to have the UK, this wonderful UK on the world stage, important player, all that nonsense. What I can't understand is Labour. I can understand the self-interest of them, but what I can't understand is individuals that are in the Labour Party and who represent Labour and all the good things that Labour is supposed to represent, who then deny democracy to so many people in Scotland. And I mean, Keir Starmer, he says on one hand that there's got to be democratic means to these things. Yeah. But then you say, well, what are the democratic means? Because you're saying you're not allowing a referendum. And the very words they use about not allowing, we will never have it. I mean, I hear some of the representatives and I'm just filled with horror at the way that they deny Scotland this. And I don't really have a huge problem with UK Labour because they're playing to their audience in the biggest part of the union that is supposed to be a union of nations and partners, which it quite clearly isn't. That's plain now. I get them. I sort of understand that. It's Scottish Labour that really, really fills me with despair because there they are sitting in Scotland in the Scottish Parliament representing people in Scotland on the day-to-day bread and butter issues that they like to talk about all the time. But what they are saying is, we don't care what you think. We don't care that 55% of you think there should be a referendum. We don't care about democracy when it comes to you. But we know, you know what? We'll get up in our hind legs and we will talk about democracy in other parts of the world and talk about people having the right to self-determination, but not for you.
Is it also true to say?
Find.
Is it also, sorry to interrupt? Is it also true to say
Sorry?
about the Brexit? They were anti-Brexit party just before the referendum, and that shift is become a pro-Brexit party. Interestingly, all the public now saying the Brexit was a bad decision, was a mistake. I just don't understand myself. Maybe you can help me understand that. The Tories and the Labour are the only parties now supporting Brexit. The public themselves, the Brexit voters now saying it was a bad decision. So I don't know who they're trying to convince.
And Scotland never ever wanted Brexit. We voted decisively to stay in the European Union. And again, you've got Scottish Labour representatives in Scotland who are denying that and saying, well, we really don't care what you thought, because actually England's more important to us. The bigger part of the UK where we get the majority of our votes is more important to us. I mean, I think it's a real, well, I think it's an error on behalf of UK Labour to come out so anti-Brexit. Because it's not just Brexit, they're also talking about, he's got no intention of bringing back freedom of movement, right? He said that the other day. Now, let's look at the subject we've just discussed about migrant workers being ripe for exploitation because we have done away with freedom of movement. So on one hand, you've got a Labour Party that's saying we're now pro-Brexit and we're not going to allow freedom of movement to come back. Really? On the other hand, you talk about workers' rights and all the rest of it. There is no consistency there. It's a direct contradiction. So they're all over the place. And I think it's only because the Tories are in such a mess that they're seeing such good results, because I don't believe that they're
Yeah,
particularly
I
trying.
mean, they saying we're gonna make Brexit work, but I feel like I have an analogy for that. It's a car without an engine. You can push it all you want. It's
Yeah,
not gonna work at the end. So
not going to work.
we're gonna move on to Sajid David's tweet that the former Chancellor Sajid David has become the latest Conservative MP to announce he will not stand again at the next election. Joining a growing exodus of high-profile members of the party, Mr. Javid announced on Twitter on Friday that after wrestling with the decision for some time, he would stand out at the next election, which will probably be held in 2024. He's the latest and the most senior Conservative MP to decide not to stand for re-election, with polls showing the party would be recently defeated if the election were held now. His announcement came hours after the party lost the Chester by-election, in which Labour recorded its largest ever vote share in the seat. Sajid Javid entered the Commons in 2010 after a successful 18-year career in the city, where he worked for Deutsche Bank and the son of the bus driver and one of the party's few MPs from a Muslim background. He quickly made a name for himself in Parliament as someone who could communicate effectively with diverse group of voters. And I just want to quickly run over that, Linda. Is it not like jumping on a life-saving boat move, or what do you think is behind of that decision?
I don't know. I can't speak about any one of the individuals because I don't know any of them, nor do I care to learn enough about them to know. I mean, I think it's quite clear there's going to be an exodus of Tory MPs before the next election. Some of them know there's absolutely no chance they're going to win their seats. Mind you, I don't have great faith in Keir Starmer to keep the momentum going, I have to say. And some of them might just feel, I can't do this anymore. There may be decency there which says, this is not what I signed up for. I'm not being able to represent people properly. And there's also, I mean, so many of these people, being an MP was a second job to them. I mean, that's an issue as well. It's something that they could do while they were still earning big bucks in the financial market. And a lot of them are still doing that. I also always have a wry smile when, again, I can't speak for Mr. Javid personally, I don't know, but I always have a wry smile when they say, oh no, I will remain loyal and, I'll just go away quietly. And then you wait for the book to come out. So we shall see how many of them decide to do memoirs, how many of them decide to be commentators because they don't like being out of the limelight. So that'll all be very
I
interesting.
mean,
I think there's a lot.
in his letter, he's pointing out, indicating to something, which is I feel like when I read it, and I was like, my first initial thought was like, this is a criticism in a way, because he's talking about principle. He's talking about, I've always worked along with my principles. So I don't think, because he was one of the person who was trying to go be a prime minister, having a go at it. I mean, every Conservative MP's had a go at be a PM, So we're
There
gonna
might be
move.
more.
Yeah, it's the only job everyone tried to have a go on it. So I mean, there's Royal Mail bringing forward last posting days for Christmas. Royal Mail has brought its in final posting days for Christmas forward by about a week, aimed at industrial action by its workers, as the regulator told us to stop blaming the pandemic for failing to make deliveries on time. Royal Mail, which is facing 6 days of strikes this month, running up until Christmas Eve, has told the public to send their cards and presents even earlier than usual if they want them to arrive in time. The final day for second-class deliveries is now 12th of December, while for the first class is 16th of December. Delivery deadlines to international destination have been brought forward, with the last being to Belgium, France, and Luxembourg on the 12th of December. The final posting date of any kind before Christmas is special delivery guaranteed on 21st of December. Members of the Communication Workers Union, CWU, which represent more than 150,000 postal workers, have already held 12 days of strike action in an increasingly bitter and protracted dispute with management over pay and condition, and further stoppage are planned on the 9th, 11th, 14th, 15th, 23rd, and the 24th of December. Today, the postal regulator said Rail Mail could not keep blaming the COVID-19 pandemic for failing to make deliveries on time, as today's performance is falling well short of where it should be. So, Linda, there's a lot about the strike I really I want to talk about. So, do you think if companies like Real Mail paying their their workers a decent pay, then their performance will go higher as well, their productivity will go higher as well?
I don't
Oh,
think it necessarily follows. Um, I think obviously people should have a decent pay. Of course they should, but it's also about conditions. And quite a lot of the strikes that we've seen over the last while have not just been about pay. It's about organisations changing folks' conditions of work as well. The current ones are about pay, but conditions are very, very important too. And there's also about respect workers are given. And, too many employers don't seem to have that kind of cooperative working that says, you know what, we're all part of the team and, we should all be working for this. And when you have division of wages, like you have so often in these big companies, where you've got people earning your sort of average wage, too often below it as well, but then you've got folk at the top of the tree who are earning enormous sums that you couldn't possibly say anyone is worth. That doesn't create for a good working environment after either. So people have to have a pride in their work, and that pride in work comes from being part of the team. And back to that exploitation word, too many workers are exploited when you look at the divisions of labour and the divisions in salary.
yeah,
So
it's
it's
also
not
about,
straight.
you said, as you rightly said, it's about condition as well. It's about job security as well,
Yeah.
because there are many will face job redundancy. And there's a law, the UK trying to bring some law forward to stop strikes and stop
Oh,
people,
terrible.
workers to fight for their right. It looks like they're pinching people and they forbidden them to say I. So I was wondering. I mean, would it be at the right time for the chief executive of Real Mill to stand down, because he feels like he's out of touch of reality and he doesn't have a good connection with his postal worker at all.
I don't know. I mean, the chief executive of these companies stands down, and then you get another suit comes along, and same terms and conditions for them, and nothing much changes. I mean, one of the things I'd like to say is we've been talking a wee bit tonight about how the Labour Party has changed, and here's another issue where Keir Starmer was actually trying to stop his MPs and his MSPs from supporting workers who'd chosen to withdraw their Labour. Again, what on earth is the Labour Party for these days?
Yeah.
Very strange.
Staying neutral, I think is more explicit than neutral. So, a U.S. court. Are we going to move on to USA now? A U.S. court strike down appointment of special master to review Trump's records. Last night, a federal appeals court terminated a special master review of documents seized from Donald Trump at his Mar-a-Lago property, paving the way for the Justice Department to regain access to the entirety of the materials used in the criminal investigation surrounding the former president. The decision by the U.S. Court of Appeal for the 11th Circuit marked as a decisive defeat for Trump in a ruling that said lower court judge should never have granted his request for an independent arbiter in the first place, and it's unlikely to be overturned in the event of appeal. The law is clear. The appeals court wrote in an unanimous 23-page opinion. Sorry, we cannot write a rule that allows any subject of a search warrant to block government investigation after the execution of the warrant. Nor can we write a rule that allows only former president to do so. Meanwhile, the January 6th House panel investigation the Capitol attack. Donald Trump instruction is set to meet in private today to consider criminal charges against the ex-president. The walls closing in on Trump. Headline has been written often, but this time with an elevated degree of peril for a man who recently announced his third run at the White House as a Republican. A subcommittee formed in October to make recommendations will present his report to the full panel today. According to the NPR, and the determination on recommending any particular action will follow in short order. The committee is expected to release its final report around the middle of this month, and it is expected to focus heavily on Trump's involvement in the Capitol attack and his potential culpability. Sorry. So, Linda, generally, I mean, why I'm surprised. I'm sure you too. that he still wants to stand as a Republican and he still wants to run for presidential. What world he is living in?
I, I mean, I think it's been well said already. The man's a complete narcissist. But what an ego! My goodness, what an ego! But what's worse is the people that support him. You know, the man to me obviously has some kind of, I don't even know how to put it, some kind of not quite typical way
Complex.
of looking at the world. And, he just thinks of himself as being like the savior. But what's really weird, what's really weird is the people that support him. And, you know,
And he might
I've
end
been
up in
following
jail.
some of this stuff, but not, yeah. And if he ends up in jail, what are we going to have? We're going to have candlelit vigils for this guy who has just screwed the system for so many years. It's all very, very bizarre. But I'm really quite pleased at this latest judgment because there's going to be an awful lot more comes out, I think, when they have access to all these papers. And one of the things right within it is that the judges have said how bad it was that this lower court judge allowed in support of Trump, you know, and then you read that she was a Trump
Appointed
appointee,
her.
and and you think, well, this is really ominous for the way forward in the US when these kind of things are allowed to happen. And we keep hearing that this is the great land of the free and everything else. They got an awful lot to look at, as indeed has the UK. We've got issues with a lot of that stuff as well, this creeping takeover that we have. So I'm
I
really
think,
pleased that they've made that judgment.
yeah, I mean, you're quite right to say about the UK as well. I think it's all around the world. You see, populism and populist politician is rising. Is no
Yeah.
longer about, character and virtues. It's more about,
No.
what you say, what comes out in
Also,
your mouth.
it, it's also what they get away with. It's this creeping takeover of so many things and putting their own place people. And when you look at the UK stuff, all about the PPP contracts, and I know that Broadcasting Scotland have covered this, and
Yeah,
when you look at all that and how there's this establishment that's looking after its own and they all think they can tell everybody else what to do, it's really quite alarming.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that PPE contract, the Lord, the Baroness in the House of Lords is very concerning. £29 million of public purse
Yeah.
being taken away, and it seems like having power preventing them to face, justice and accountability. We're gonna move on to a billionaire Modi ally on the verge of taking over independent Indian news channel, NDTV. One of the India's few remaining news channel known for independent reporting is about to be taken over by a billionaire ally of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In recent years, NDTV News Delhi television has earned a reputation as one of the last bastion of independent journalism among India's mainstream media, which have increasingly been out under pressure to toy the government line and the Modi who came to power in 2014. In August, Gautam Adani, the Indian industrialist who is Asia's richest man, began a covert takeover bid for NDTV by acquiring a third-party company that had a stake in the channel. The move was met with fierce resistance from NDTV's husband and wife, founders and directors, Parani and Radhika Roy, who said the deal was done without discussion, consent, or notice, and who sought to block transfer of shares. However, this week it was confirmed that the Adani Group had acquired a 29.18% stake in the news group and has an open offer on an additional 26% of the company. This week, the Roys stepped down from the board of NDTV's promoter company, which had sold their shares to Adani. Journalists and analysts expressed concern that an Adani takeover would compromise NDTV's editorial independence, which has stood in a stark contrast to other mainstream news channels, which have largely become a mouthpiece for Modi's right-wing government. As a result, NDTV had come under direct pressure from the government, while its founders were investigated for money laundering and banned from living in India. And it feels like, Linda, this is something we hear often in the UK too. Uh, Privatizing and right wing rich people taking over of media, and quite similar was what's going on in the UK, and that attempt to taking over of Channel 4. And what do you make of? Oh, wait, what do you make of that? And how would that impact India if that goes ahead the way it is?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've read a bit about it, and it certainly does seem worrying. I mean, I'm always worried when pals of those in power end up in really prominent positions with the ability to um, support their pals in power, and the ability to influence going forward. And we've talked tonight about the UK having that creeping invidious takeover in so many things. We've talked about the US, and you only need to look at some of the US channels on TV that are out and out supporters of Trump, and that we see very, very often that they just spout misinformation. And then you've got that guy that was in the radio, Alex, is it John? I don't want to miscall him. The guy that was fined recently on the radio.
Alex Jones.
I think Jones, Alex Jones, yeah. And he, some of the stuff that he's come out with. I mean, I'm hearing that he's actually now filed for bankruptcy, but he had himself in the social media news again by interviewing dodgy folks with huge conspiracy theories. So here we are, India, with their last TV channel that is seen to be fair and open. And I know a lot of people have resigned and left because they're really worried about this. So is this again about making the rulers of the country, those with the power, is it about making them inviolable because they have control over what the general population are told, what is reported, and indeed what is not reported? Seriously, seriously worrying. We do have issues in the UK as well. Of course we do. There are concerns about the bias of TV reporting to some regard, but particularly newspapers. I mean, some of the right-wing newspapers in the UK are absolutely horrendous. The stuff that they come out with in that wish to influence public opinion. So yes, I think it's worrying for India as well. You know, and I'm really glad that there's so many online broadcasters right across the world who are for truth. I mean, here we are tonight talking on one, Broadcasting Scotland, who does very, very careful research and gets stories out there, news out there that we're not getting on the mainstream media. This is happening all over the world, so we've got to maintain hope that these are the kind of things that people are listening to more and more. I think we're seeing some of the results of that in various countries across the globe that we don't have time to go into, where you're seeing public protests. I suspect that might start happening in India as well. In fact, it probably has already been happening and not been adequately reported.
Thank you. We're gonna come back to Glasgow from India. So Glasgow-based HBC received 30 million grant to develop a hydrogen fuel cell powered heavy goods vehicle. The Advanced Propulsion Centre APC has announced investment of £33 million in 5 collaborative research and development projects through its latest round of funding. The combined industry and government support will bring forward world-leading and innovative technology and aim to boost the automotive sector and expand the supply chain and create and safeguard jobs at some of the country's best-known manufacturers. A £30 million grant has gone to Glasgow-based HVS who are investing in hydrogen fuel cell technology through a project that will develop a heavy goods vehicle and tractor to replace its diesel-powered equivalents. Heavily polluting diesel HGVs currently contribute 20% of transport emissions, despite making up only 2% of vehicles. The project, a consortium, will look at the full vehicle fuel cell and battery hybrid powertrain, covering engineering, testing, and development. HVS CEO Jawad Khurshid said, "Our mission to decarbonize heavy-duty transport in the UK has reached a major milestone with the help of the APC grant." So this is a very welcoming news, I would say, Linda. What does that mean for
Yeah.
that? That will create many jobs, I would say.
Well, yeah, I hope so. I mean, as part of the whole renewables industry in Scotland, this is a major part as well. And there's been loads of research being done over the last years about the use of hydrogen, as an alternative fuel source. Strathclyde University have been very, very much involved. And in fact, when I was in Parliament representing East Kilbride, we have very good research being carried out in East Kilbride as well to look at that kind of thing. But this is particularly important because it's heavy goods vehicles, and and as you were saying, the amount of emissions from a relatively small part of road users that comes from HGVs. So this is major. And I think it's wonderful that this has come to Glasgow, that we're moving forward. I think it should be used as the catalyst for much more change. Uh, you know, for example, local authorities all use vehicles, not always heavy goods, but they do have bin lorries and things like that. Lots of vans dotting about the place. So I would like to see a real push in local authorities for they to actually start looking at their fleet and how they can utilise hydrogen as well as electric vehicles. Some are doing it already. We've seen bus companies doing it. So, but this is big. This is big and should be used for the way forward much more. And yes, it's putting Scotland right at the forefront in the UK and beyond in terms of reaching these zero emission targets. So it's good news.
I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think. Do you agree? Like, if the local authorities, like you rightly mentioned, if they take the lead on bringing that model forward, and they have to promote that, they have to convince people that we must go greener, because there's still some people reluctant to those
Yeah.
new technology. You see, you have that, because what I was seeing in Glasgow was a taxi, and was also I would say a green taxi, because it wasn't fuel, it wasn't diesel, it was full electricity. Well, the taxi driver interestingly said it's only available in London. But I think, do you think Glasgow is the best place to start this innovation? Because Scotland is doing a lot of good things in terms of going greener.
Yeah, I think everywhere's doing their bit, but I think Glasgow's really important because it's our major city, in terms of population. We also have a very forward-looking local authority in Glasgow, who have already, over the last few years since Susan Aitken's council took over and she became leader, have been really pushing the green agenda in Glasgow in terms of low emission zones. Yes, it's sometimes difficult to come to terms with. I mean, I know people get really annoyed at things like the bus lanes and the fact that parking charges are higher because it's all about trying to stop people using their cars in the city. And yes, it's difficult. Change is always difficult, but it has to be done. I think there's real courage being shown by Glasgow already. And so, yes, I think it's the major centre that Glasgow and its surrounding areas. I mean, I mentioned East Kilbride earlier. In the west of Scotland, that's the hub that it should be. Up northeast, it's Aberdeen, and that's as it should be as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, with a lot of people, with a little help of funding as well, encouraging people, encouraging drivers.
Yeah,
If it is loan provided and some funds there, that would definitely help. I would say, in my opinion, help people to
yeah,
transition. And we're gonna move on to another story, which is um, about homeowners and greeners, and enhanced support to make homes warmer and greener. From today will be a simpler and more affordable for people to install climate-friendly heat and energy efficiency measures in their homes. Homeowners can only apply for a standalone grant of £7,500 from the Energy Scotland scheme to install heat pumps. Previously, applicants were required to sign up for a loan before they qualify for this funding, but now can access the money directly. The new approach is designed to offer greater flexibility for those looking to make their homes more climate friendly. The enhanced measures will also include an extra £1,500 to homeowners in rural areas, in line with a commitment made as part of the White House agreement. A standalone grant of £7,500 for energy efficiency improvement to homes will also be made available. Minister for Zero Carbon Buildings, Patrick Harvey, announced that change whilst on a visit to a Home Energy Scotland Advice Centre in Edinburgh to learn more about the ways the advisors have been helping people to access energy efficiency funding. Patrick Harvey said, reducing emission from our homes and buildings is one of the most important things we can do to help end Scotland's contribution to climate change. Our heat in buildings strategy set out ambitious target to transform how we heat and insulate buildings, and we have committed 1.8 billion over this Parliament to support its delivery. This includes doubling our funding for the Home Energy Scotland scheme this year. The improvement to Home Energy Scotland scheme, including importantly targeted support for those in rural area, will make it easier for people to access funding to ensure their homes are more energy efficient and use climate-friendly heating. And I think it's another good news about going green in Scotland. And what do you make of that? And do you think that will help homeowners and people who are trying to insulate their house?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's good. It's really good news. The Scottish Government are committed to this agenda and have been for some years now. So yes, it's good. I'm really pleased that they have found the resources to be able to do this, because this is building for the future. I think the Scottish Government has been innovative in this stuff, and I think they're way ahead of the UK Government. I mean, remember, it's not that long ago the UK Government decided that they would do subsidies and things for solar panels, etc. And then they pulled the funding away for that and reduced the amount of money that people could get for selling their electricity back to the grid and stuff. So the secret of these things, it has to be sustainable. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that the Scottish Government has looked at the future for this. They've worked it all out. They have seen the longer term benefits, and I say good on them. I hope there's a really good marketing campaign so that people take this up. And I also hope that developers, in terms of new buildings, are given much, much stronger regulation in terms of what they have to provide in houses. Some of that's been done. We need a lot more.
Thank you. We're going to move on to another topic, which is 16 million pound for disabled children in the first year of new Scottish benefit. Almost 16 million pound has been distributed to thousands of families with disabled children in the first year of a new Scottish benefit. The latest official figures from Social Security Scotland show the families of nearly 44,000 children and young people were receiving child disability payment in September this year. The benefit replaced the DWP's disability living allowance for children and helps cover the extra costs of caring for a child who is disabled, has a health condition, or is terminally ill. Minister for Social Security Ben Macpherson said, caring for a child who is disabled or has long-term ill health condition can result in extra costs for families, from buying specialist equipment to paying for taxis to get to appointment. It can also be more expensive for children with disability to take part in the activities and opportunities with their peers. Child disability payment helps parents to support their children and assist young people to live their lives to the fullest. It is welcome news that around 44,000 families are now receiving child disability payment a year after we rolled out across Scotland. So, Linda, I think Scotland is taking initiative on helping families and children in particular. And what do you make of that? Is it a new model? Because is it a new model just specified to Scotland, or is it just a UK-wide thing? Or
well, it was how this came about. This is one of the social security benefits that, after the last Scotland bill was made, there was some of the welfare benefits were given to Scotland to administer, and they've been gradually getting taken over. So there used to be an element of disability living allowance for children, but the Scottish Government, in taking over, decided that they would have a very, very specific child disability benefit. Everybody knew what it was for. Everybody made it very clear. There's a really good campaign to make sure that people were getting what they were entitled to. So I think it's been a success. And it's an absolute fact that, you know, for families with a child with a disability, of course there's a lot of extra expense It just is the way of it, and that bit of extra help is needed. So this is really good news that it's been successful and that it will carry on. I'm not au fait with the absolute detail of where it differs, but I do know that it's much easier to understand and it's much more accessible for people. So that's good news.
Thank you, thank you, Linda. I was just thinking, like, if Scotland or if the Scottish government had power on benefits on universal credit, how
Oh,
would that might
yes.
look like?
Yes. Well, we fought for it. You know, I was on the committee when we were doing the new Scotland Act, and I was on the Smith Commission looking at these things. And yes, it's only a very small proportion of benefits that the Scottish Government has taken over under Social Security Scotland. We could do so much more. Universal credit's a particular issue because that's where the things like sanctions come in, and the UK government, I think, are appalling the way that they deal with that. So yeah, I would like to see Scotland having control over the benefit system in full, and indeed other things, because I think we could make much better decisions here on the ground in Scotland than are made for us by those who purport to look after us.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Belinda. Well, that's it for this evening. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So, to everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programs will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to enable us to employ staff to make more programs. And that's from me. Thank you very much and good night. And thanks for watching.